Now we've reached the final and possibly most underrated album of the first Jandek era, being described as typical for its time. As lucky number 7, Your Turn to Fall truly stands alone in the early catalog, despite acting as a cousin to the twin albums just before it. Back in 2012, I remember not seeing much of the album on YouTube, so I thought maybe it was better suited for the hardcore fans who were willing to, write to Corwood Industries. Obviously, things have changed since then, and it's definitely easier to see what makes the record special. Even if you don't, you can't deny that its best moments would still be ranked highly in Jandek's catalog. Although the cover doesn't seem unusual by Jandek standards, that immediately changes once you hear the artist talk about it. Like I've said before, he likes some of his lyrics enough to name albums after them, and Your Turn to Fall originates from Don't Get Too Upset on Staring at the Cellophane. In the John Trubay interview, for some reason he said he was struck by the way the line came out, and that hearing it changes the character of this new album cover. Well, Don't Get Too Upset is about a quote-unquote minor theft, and in true Jandek fashion, he never says what was stolen. If this white desk was the object in question, the whole scenario is very funny to imagine. Even if I missed the mark on this one, it's still a big deal for a Jandek album cover to mean this much. When I call Your Turn to Fall the cousin of its two predecessors, I'm referring to the similar guitar tuning. I slowly noticed the similarity as I got to know the album, but I could always tell it apart from the twins if my playlist was on shuffle. I'm not totally sure what part of the tuning is different. I'm guessing Jandek made it a bit higher than the last one, and then adjusted at least one string from there. Whatever the case, I think it's more pleasing to the ear, especially when the plucking technique is used. However, out of nowhere, Jandek decides to change it up on track 7. How do we know this? It's titled New String, which probably refers to the high gauge E string that allows for that low pitch you hear. Meanwhile, the other strings are tuned to create a more haunting atmosphere than before. New String may only be a throwaway instrumental, but on the next few albums, this kind of tuning would be the standard for acoustic songs. Finally, let's talk about John Plays Drums. It's been confirmed that John was a Jandek associate back then, but the extent of the partnership is a mystery. According to the Wire magazine interview from 2014, people just dropped by to play music, and no information on them has been released. Still, I'm sure many fans like to imagine John as a frequent contributor, or even the male counterpart to Nancy. Speaking of which, these are the same lyrics she sang a year earlier, except the last 4 lines aren't repeated this time. I wonder what Jandek saw in this track that made it suitable for collaboration. Anyway, there may have already been other instruments, but this track was the first to include another instrumentalist. It's hard to imagine recent albums without a backup band, and that tradition has its roots with John the drummer. Having said that, his drumming turns this rain song into a thunderstorm song, whose arrhythmic clattering would make the Shags proud. For such a notable track, the juxtaposition of beautiful lyrics and awkward sounds is almost comedic. If you like the simple songs, Your Turn to Fall has several to choose from. Take note of Echo, which consists of the repeated phrase, "Won't you get along?" It may seem like filler at first, but the title actually justifies the repetition. That bit of cleverness automatically makes Echo one of Jandek's better simple songs. For something more complex, check out If Your Fortune Fails You, possibly the sequel to First You Think Your Fortune's Lovely from Ready for the House. Whatever he means by fortune, it's something that's gone astray. The sequel is more focused than the original, in that there's some kind of interpersonal conflict going on, but it's still hard to tell what went wrong, especially with lyrics like, "I was outside of you, but you were all around me." Just recently, I realized that Your Turn to Fall is a very balanced album. The essential tracks are evenly dispersed, and there's at least one decent song in each gap between them. It all starts with Liquids Flow to the Sea, another example of the naturalistic imagery Jandek is fond of. John Trubay mentioned this in the famous interview, although the artist himself didn't comment on it. However, I see the title as a variation on the coming and going theme on I Knew You Would Leave, except it's represented by water instead of rocks. It makes perfect sense when you hear the lyrics, which simply describe a temporary friendship. There's even some mournful humming at two parts. It may not be an epic journey like its counterpart from 6 and 6, but I first heard this at the end of high school, and it always reminded me of the times I walked past my old friends, acting like we never knew each other.
You walk by, close your eyes, and then you tell me goodbye.
It's the perfect example of a basic Jandek track striking a chord at just the right time. Moving on to the other guitar tuning, we have Centaur Train, a song that is not talked about enough. On my old YouTube channel, it still has fewer views than the other ones I posted, so it's time to give it the respect it deserves. Sadly, no centaurs appear in the lyrics. It's just classic Jandek surrealism. The song is about a trip through the wetlands of Florida as the narrator searches for somebody on horseback. When he reaches the train tracks, he decides to travel that way instead. I think the punchline is that he gets picked up by a ghost train, since he claims there's death around him everywhere when he sits down. I guess this means he was looking for a dead person all along. Whatever it means, the rhythm is quite lively on this song, and the vocal melodies are top-notch by Jandek standards. A mellow track with whispered vocals and gentle plucking, They Knew My Game is a perfect conclusion to the first Jandek era. Appropriately, he begins by announcing, "This is my last game," hopefully grabbing your attention if you've been daydreaming since Centaur Train. The lyrics are the words of a gambling addict who's gone broke and lied about where the money went.
I had to lie, said I had no money, I couldn't even get a job.
Presumably, the title refers to his family, who knows exactly what's going on, yet they keep enabling him. We don't hear the end of this, but I'm sure the downward spiral continues from there. For Jandek fans tending to overindulge, this should definitely be a go-to song. To recap, let's see how Your Turn to Fall would be considered typical. The surprises include an even split between the guitar tunings and a guest drummer. Both of these rank the album above the Twins in terms of experimentation. Judging this album against the third and fourth ones is trickier, because there was already no clear winner there. Collectively, I'd rate them just above Your Turn to Fall. In terms of structure, this one definitely tops Chair Beside a Window, but my opinion of the songs is always swinging from album to album. To settle that, I guess I'd have to make a top 25 song list for this era. Anyway, on Your Turn to Fall, the essential tracks all vary from each other in interesting ways, and even the decent ones are notable. Sure, other songs may not go anywhere, but that's just part of what makes the record typical. Thankfully, the next one ushers in a new era, and our conception of typical might not return for a while. Get ready to leave the house.